welcome to the deep dive.
Mm.
You know, if you cast your mind back just a few months, think about WrestleMania XL.
Oh, yeah.
The emotion, the spectacle, I mean, the absolute euphoria of Cody Rhodes finally finishing his story, getting that undisputed WWE championship.
It's a huge moment. Absolutely huge.
It really felt like, okay, this is the start of something new, a new golden era maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The American Nightmare, he did it.
Yeah.
Slew the tribal chief, kind of saved the company from the bloodline, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just the ultimate cathartic babyface moment that, honestly, wrestling fans have been waiting years to see.
Yeah, it was more than just a title change, wasn't it? It felt like seismic. It was the wrap-up to this huge arc that had just dominated everything for, nearly 2 years?
Right.
And the audience had put so much into it emotionally, you know? All the hope, the heartbreak with Cody Rhodes. But, well, here we are.
Here we are.
We're already pretty deep into his second reign. Gotta remember, he won it back at SummerSlam 2025 after losing it briefly.
Right, from Cena.
Exactly. And the talk now, the stuff swirling around online, the news reports, fan analysis, it's not really celebratory anymore, is it?
No, it's shifted dramatically.
Yeah, it's this growing feeling, this consensus almost, that his time on top has become, well, boring, stale. That's the word you keep hearing.
And that's the core thing, isn't it? That contradiction is why we need to do this deep dive today. How does the most anticipated, most emotionally charged title win in maybe a decade just fizzle out, creatively speaking, so quickly?
Right.
So our mission today is to really get into the material, dissect this whole situation. We're going to look at the specific complaints people have, the really granular stuff. We'll see how his run stacks up against, let's be honest, the almost impossible standard Roman Reigns set with his tenure.
Yeah, that comparison is tricky but needed.
We'll look at the specific creative, well, shortcomings maybe. And crucially, we have to explore the commercial side of things, the business realities that are probably driving this, let's say, cautious booking strategy.
Definitely need to cover that angle. And just to set the timeline clearly for you listening, Cody wins at WrestleMania XL back in April. That first reign ends not super long after. Then he gets the undisputed title back, retrieving it from John Cena at SummerSlam 2025.
Got it.
So when critics are talking about this stagnation, they're mostly looking at the booking around this second reign, but it's also kind of combined with maybe a lack of real momentum built up during that first run, too.
So the big question for us, I guess, is this just the audience being fickle? You know, they finally get what they clamored for and then immediately move the goalposts.
Or is the creative team genuinely, dropping the ball here? Are they fumbling the most popular babyface they've had in years?
That's what we need to figure out. Okay, let's dive right into that critique, focusing specifically on this period after SummerSlam 2025 when he got the title back. The criticism really seemed to ramp up fast, and it seems like there's one immediate, really big issue.
Repetition.
Yeah, that's the first thing everyone points to. What's the most glaring problem with his schedule, creatively, since he got that belt back?
It's just the sheer lack of variety in opponents. It's stark. Since winning the championship back, Cody Rhodes has only defended the undisputed WWE championship on 3 occasions. That's it, 3.
Yep.
And all 3 times, it was against the exact same challenger, Drew McIntyre.
Wow. Okay. 3 for 3 against Drew.
Yeah. You just can't sell a championship reign as dynamic or, even dominant in a compelling way when the only person the champion is beating is the same guy 3 times, basically back to back to back.
3 matches against the same admittedly top-tier talent like Drew McIntyre, but in such a compressed time frame. I mean, that just creates burnout almost instantly, right? Not just for the fans watching, but probably for the performers too.
Absolutely. And when critics look at that pattern, what conclusion do they jump to? What does it say about the booking room?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
Well, the conclusions are pretty damning, and they kind of fall into 2 main buckets. Right. The first one, maybe the softer critique, is that this constant opponent just implies the creative team is, bereft of good ideas for their top guy.
They're stuck.
Yeah, like they've got one known commodity in Drew McIntyre who they know can deliver a main event quality match, and they're just recycling that rivalry until they figure out the next big step, probably involving the bloodline again.
Okay, that's one theory. But you said there's a second critique.
Yeah, and the second one is much sharper, actually. It kind of targets Rhodes himself, suggesting maybe he is unwilling to work with other talents.
Ooh, okay. Is there any basis for that? Because that sounds pretty serious.
Honestly, most wrestling journalists, insiders, people who know Cody's history, They pretty much dismissed that second point out of hand.
Right, his track record across different companies is pretty extensive.
Exactly. He's worked with tons of different people, but the fact that the rumor even bubbles up tells you something about the situation. It points to this vacuum of credible challengers on SmackDown right now. If they aren't lining up fresh opponents, people start grasping for reasons, even internal ones.
So let's stick with the creative failure angle then. If you're going to use Drew McIntyre, a former world champion, a legit main eventer in 3 straight title matches,
Yeah.
you're actively hurting his stock, aren't you?
No, massively.
Doesn't having McIntyre lose repeatedly, especially in championship matches, just weaken the entire heel side of the roster on SmackDown?
It absolutely does. I mean, think about it. McIntyre has been positioned as one of the most credible, maybe genuinely frustrated heels in the whole company for a while now.
Yeah, he's got that edge.
Right. So by having him fail to win the title 3 times in, what, maybe 8 or 10 weeks, you're basically signaling to the entire audience, look, if this guy, one of our best, can't beat Cody, then probably nobody else on this current roster can either.
It makes everyone else look weaker by comparison.
Exactly. It turns McIntyre from a potential conqueror into just another gatekeeper, and it speeds up that feeling of predictability that we really need to dig into later.
And it's not just who he's facing, right? The way he's winning these matches, especially recently, that seems to be where the audience is really starting to question things. The nature of this second reign is already being called far from convincing.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really tricky. This is where the tightrope walk begins for the creative team, and honestly, where some sources suggest they might be making a huge mistake.
Because fans are reportedly starting to turn on him.
That's the danger zone. We're seeing these questionable ways he's retaining the title, and they just flat out contradict the whole ethos of the guy who finished the story through, honor and hard work and all that.
Okay, let's get specific on these questionable wins. What exactly did he do that caused this fan backlash? What crossed the line?
Okay, 2 major examples really stand out, things that shifted how people saw his character. First, there was a title defense on SmackDown, televised. Cody retained, but it was via disqualification, a DQ.
Okay, DQs happen, sometimes protectively.
Right, but how it happened is key. He retained after using the title belt itself as a weapon.
Okay. Using the championship belt, the symbol of honor, and the top prize as a weapon. That's classic heel stuff.
Strictly a heel move. It immediately raises eyebrows. That's a fundamental betrayal, like you said, of that white meat babyface persona he spent 2 solid years building.
But then it didn't stop there, right? It escalated even more at a non-televised event, a Saturday Night Main Event, or SNME.
Precisely. At that SNME show, another defense against McIntyre again, he used what people are calling an illegal tactic. Apparently, he hit a DDT, but it was onto the actual championship belt, which he'd strategically placed on the mat beforehand.
So he used the belt to set up the finishing sequence.
Yeah. The pinfall itself might have been clean after the move, but the move leading to it, using the belt like that, undeniably dirty tactics.
Using the belt. Whether it leads to a DQ or it's part of the setup for the win, that feels like crossing a sacred line for this specific hero character. The whole point was he overcomes the odds. He doesn't cheat like the people he fought to win the belt.
Exactly.
So what's the psychology there? Why is that kind of betrayal, using those underhanded means, so damaging specifically to the investment fans made in his whole finish the story thing?
It just shatters the trust immediately, doesn't it? Fans didn't just invest in Cody Rhodes, the wrestler. They invested in him as this, moral compass. He was the complete opposite of the corrupt, entitled Roman Reigns and the Bloodline.
Right. That was the whole point.
The entire premise of finishing the story was about achieving that ultimate victory through integrity, through blood, sweat, tears, all that stuff. So when that hero starts relying on shortcuts, using weapons, even if maybe he feels provoked, the whole narrative just flips on its head.
Yeah, it doesn't track.
It suggests one of 2 things. Either A, the hero actually isn't good enough to win clean anymore, or B, the power, the championship, has started to corrupt him. And the fan reaction is immediate. People are calling for him to lose the title because they absolutely do not want to heel Cody Rhodes. That's not what they signed up for.
It's a classic booking nightmare, isn't it? A real catch-22. If Cody stays too squeaky clean, too perfect, people call him boring and predictable.
Right.
But if he starts fighting dirty, maybe trying to inject some much-needed edge or unpredictability into his character, the fans feel totally betrayed because that's not the hero they spent 2 years. And let's be real, countless merchandise dollars supporting.
It screams of maybe an attempted slow heel turn, doesn't it? Perhaps they sensed the staleness coming and thought, let's add some gray, but the audience is just immediately rejecting it, loud and clear.
Yeah.
The second Cody starts acting like a heel, the whole foundation of his victory, his story, it just collapses. And you risk losing that massive commercial investment they've built in the character. It feels like a clear sign the creative team is trying to force tension into the story because the roster itself isn't providing credible enough threats naturally.
They're making the champion the source of unpredictability instead of the challengers.
That's a great way to put it. And it's a risky path.
And speaking of perceived failures, let's talk numbers for a second. There's this overall trend, apparently, of SmackDown ratings continuing to fall. And now, according to some analysis, part of that blame is being laid at Cody's feet as the leading face of the brand.
Yeah, that's the tough part about being the top star, isn't it? If the show's overall viewership is dipping, and you're the anchor, the person holding the main title, the blame often points your way, sometimes regardless of how good your matches are or how hard you're working.
So the hypothesis is just, fans are bored with him leading the show because the feuds aren't grabbing them.
That seems to be the general idea floating around, that the audience isn't connecting with the current title picture because the feuds lack that high-stakes tension, that feeling that maybe, just maybe, he could lose tonight.
But hang on a second. Are we really blaming the entire rating slump on one champion? I mean, aren't there always bigger factors? Like how people watch TV now, maybe specific network competition, or just the overall perception of us, the rest of the roster on SmackDown. Is the source material maybe putting too much weight just on Cody here?
That's a really important counterpoint, and it's fair. You definitely can't pin all demographic shifts or viewing habit changes on just one wrestler. That's silly.
Right.
However, the analysis tends to focus on the gap in the narrative, maybe. Historically, when you have a newly crowned champion who is really firing on all cylinders, who feels like a big deal, they usually generate enough buzz and momentum to, stop a ratings decline, or at least stabilize the numbers for a bit. So when the ratings keep falling, even after the big emotional win, analysts start suggesting that maybe the audience isn't responding to the current story being told. Or maybe they've just tuned out because they feel like the outcome of the main event is never really in doubt. And for a show like SmackDown, which relies so heavily on that weekly tune-in, predictability is just, it's poison.
Okay, so if some sources see this as a serious creative problem needing a quick fix, what kind of immediate, maybe even drastic solutions are being thrown around to try and correct this and maybe boost SmackDown?
Well, the suggestions mostly revolve around maybe lessening his exposure a bit, letting other people step into the spotlight more. The most common idea you hear is taking the title off him completely, at least for a while.
Wow, really? Take the belt off him already?
Or at least engineer some kind of temporary break, maybe an injury angle or something. The feeling seems to be that relying so heavily on just Cody and kind of shoving him down the throats of the fans, as one source put it, could be a really risky move. It could backfire badly if the audience fully rejects this shift in his character we talked about.
Okay, so if they take the title off him or give him a break, who are the names being floated to step up and inject that immediate excitement, maybe give the ratings a shot in the arm?
The names that keep coming up are usually established fan favorites, guys who maybe haven't had a significant long title run recently, but have that credibility. You hear Randy Orton a lot, a 14-time champion, instantly credible, plus that built-in history with Cody is huge.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Then you have the proven technical masters like AJ Styles, the dynamic energy of someone like Finn Balor, or tapping into that deep emotional connection fans have with Sami Zayn.
Interesting, Mick.
Yeah, and the argument is pretty straightforward. If the audience seems to be cooling on the current face of the brand, maybe you need to diversify the appeal. Push other stars up to be at par with Cody Rhodes, lighten his load a bit, and just tell different kinds of stories at the top of the card.
That actually sets us up perfectly for the next section. Because if Cody's getting heat for being too present and maybe too predictable, we absolutely have to look at the reign that came right before his, a reign defined by the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Scarcity and a different kind of predictability, Roman Reigns.
The contrast couldn't be starker. Okay, we absolutely have to start this by acknowledging upfront that comparing these two reigns is inherently a bit unfair, right?
Yeah, the timelines are just wildly different.
Roman Reigns held that undisputed WWE championship for, well over 1,300 days. It was insane. Cody's reigns combined. They're nowhere near that, just a fraction of the time.
Not even close.
But They both held the same physical, undisputed WWE championship. And their reigns really defined two completely different eras, two totally different philosophies of how you book a champion. So inevitably, the audience, the analyst, everyone is going to compare them, how they carried themselves, how often they showed up, the booking around them.
And based on the source material, the very first key difference is actually an area where Cody seems to win hands down, based on metrics, champion presence, and just sheer work ethic. He promised he'd be a fighting champion.
And he has been.
And he seems to have delivered on that, at least in terms of just being there.
Absolutely. The contrast in work ethic is, I mean, it's night and day. It's undeniable. Cody shows up every single week on SmackDown. You see him on the house show loops. Sometimes he even pops over to Raw for angles or segments.
He's doing the work.
He is the absolute antithesis of the part-time champion that Reigns became. He's upholding that traditional expectation. The champion is the face of the brand, the guy you see every week, the one leading the charge on the road schedule.
Whereas Reigns, especially after he unified the titles, he shifted gears completely.
Oh, yeah. He basically became a primary part-time performer. He leveraged that incredible position he was in, negotiated a different kind of schedule after becoming the undisputed champion, and basically only showed up when it was time to build a specific premium live event match.
Let's put some actual numbers behind that scarcity with Reigns, because I think the sheer length of his reign sometimes makes people forget how infrequently he actually defended the titles.
Yeah.
After unifying them, how often did we actually see Roman defend?
Yeah, the defense frequency data really tells the story of these two different eras. So after he unified the belts at WrestleMania 38, Roman Reigns defended that unified title just 3 times in the rest of 2022.
3 times in like 9 months.
3 times. Then, in the entire calendar year of 2023, he defended it only 5 times.
Okay, still incredibly low for a full year.
And then in 2024, before he finally lost it to Cody at WrestleMania XL, he'd only defended it once. So add that up. That's a grand total of 9 defenses in 2 full years as the unified, undisputed top champion of the company.
9 defenses.
Yeah.
In 2 years. Wow. Okay, so now compare that to Cody. Even with the criticism about the repetition against Drew in his second reign, how does his defense rate stack up?
It just blows those Reigns numbers completely out of the water. It's not even comparable. Cody defended the title 6 times just in his first 7 months as champion.
Okay, so already more than Reigns did in a whole year.
Way more. And if you combine his 2 reigns, he's already approaching double-digit title defenses in significantly less than a year on top. He is actively, visibly upholding that promise of being a fighting champion, showing up every week, building feuds on TV, participating in tag matches or other angles. The live crowds really seem to appreciate that presence, that diligence.
So, okay, Cody's diligent, he's present, he's fulfilling that traditional babyface champion role. But Reigns, his dominance seemed to come because he was scarce, right?
Yeah.
That scarcity made every appearance, every defense feel like a massive deal.
Exactly. That scarcity was a huge part of the mystique.
What was the psychological difference for the audience comparing Reigns' scarcity to Cody's constant presence?
Well, when Reigns wrestled, you knew it was a special occasion. It felt like an event. You knew the main event spot was basically guaranteed for him. And because he wrestled so rarely, the tension around those matches got magnified like crazy.
Right. You felt like anything could happen, even though it rarely did.
Yeah, the crowd knew the title probably wasn't changing hands often, if ever, but just the infrequent nature of the appearances made the matches feel like these huge life-or-death struggles. Cody, on the other hand, by being there every single week, he inherently kind of normalizes the championship, you know?
Makes it feel less special just by being visible.
In a way, yeah. When you see the champion every Friday night, the perceived threat level of his challengers almost has to diminish unless they are built up as absolute undeniable monsters, which, as we've discussed and will again, hasn't really been happening consistently outside the bloodline.
And that Reigns' scarcity, it wasn't just him being absent, it was heavily supported by another critical factor, the faction. The bloodline was maybe Reigns' greatest creative asset, and it fundamentally changed how we saw him as champion.
Oh, absolutely critical. The bloodline provided, like, institutional interference. It wasn't just one guy helping, it was a system. Reigns had this formidable faction, Solo Sikoa, the Usos at their peak, Paul Heyman scheming, constantly interfering in his matches.
Always working.
Always. And that did 2 things. It made him seem practically unstoppable, sure, but it also gave him a constant out. When Reigns won clean, it was dominance. When he retained because of interference, it often protected his character's mystique and immediately set up the next challenger's reason for a grudge match because they got screwed.
Right, they denied so many people clean shots or victories. Guys like Kevin Owens, Drew McIntyre himself, LA Knight, even Cody in their first Mania match.
All of them arguably cost matches or clean rematches due to bloodline interference.
That faction support meant that even when Reigns looked vulnerable, even in his closest calls, he was protected. The story was always, well, he won, but he didn't necessarily have to win clean.
And that is the massive difference with Cody, who is largely presented as a solo act.
Yeah, Cody is much more the traditional one-man show champion. He relies on allies only when he's absolutely forced to, like when holding off the entire New Look bloodline structure. Gets occasional help, sure, often kind of last-minute stuff from Owens, maybe Randy Orton, Jey Uso, Sami Zayn. But he fundamentally lacks that institutional, constant, guaranteed interference that really defined Reigns' era of dominance. And the weird result, the paradox, is that because Cody doesn't have that faction constantly interfering, almost every win is clean, or at least technically sound according to the rules, which oddly might make the outcome feel safer to the audience.
Isn't that strange? Yeah, there's less external chaos being injected into the match dynamics to make the audience genuinely doubt the result.
When Reigns wrestled, you were always watching for the interference, weren't you?
Totally. You were on the edge of your seat waiting for Solo Sikoa to hit the spike or for Heyman to pull some trick or an Uso to sneak in. That element of like inevitable chaos meant every single Reigns match felt like this monumental obstacle course for the challenger.
Whereas Cody's matches, lacking that constant external threat, they have to rely solely on the challenger's own credibility, their internal threat level. And as we've kind of established, those challengers just haven't been consistently built up strongly enough to feel like they can overcome Cody on their own.
Exactly. It puts all the pressure on building credible individual challengers, which SmackDown seems to be struggling with.
And speaking of monumental, let's touch on match placement at the premium live events, the PLEs. Because this is another area where the booking decisions around Reigns significantly boosted the prestige of his title reign.
Yeah, this is a subtle but really important point. Reigns consistently held down the main event spot at the PLEs. He closed the show. Think about it. He closed the last 4 WrestleManias in a row.
That sends a clear message.
It sends the clearest possible message to the audience. The undisputed WWE Championship is the single most important thing happening on this entire show. The title was the show. And that consistent placement reinforced his status as the undisputed tribal chief, the biggest star, the final boss.
Cody's booking, however, has been more flexible. He hasn't always main evented, which some people argue is actually a good thing for the roster overall, lets other stories get the spotlight. But others argue it diminishes the unified title itself.
That's the debate, exactly. Cody has wrestled in different spots on the card. Sometimes he closes, like at SummerSlam, but sometimes other matches close, especially ones with maybe huge personal grudges or involving massive outside stars like CM Punk or The Rock, if you were around. A key example people point to is Clash at the Castle, where his I Quit match with AJ Styles, a really intense match, actually opened the show.
Opening this show with the undisputed champion.
Yeah. Now, the argument for that is, okay, you're allowing other talents, other stories to get that main event shine, which is maybe beneficial for building roster depth overall.
Yeah.
It makes those other matches feel important too. But the counter argument is pretty fierce.
What's the counter?
The counter is the undisputed WWE Championship must consistently close the show to maintain the level of prestige that Reigns spent years building, especially given that this title is supposed to be the single, unified, top prize in the entire company. Putting it anywhere else risks making it feel less than.
So, if the unified title isn't always the main event, doesn't that implicitly signal to the audience that the championship itself might be secondary? Maybe secondary to certain personal rivalries, or worse, secondary to whatever the ongoing bloodline saga is doing that night?
It definitely risks creating confusion about priorities, yeah. Reigns established that title as the ultimate goal. The MacGuffin, the entire show revolved around either protecting it or capturing it. When Cody's title matches get moved to the opening slot or even the middle of the card, it can feel like the title match is just a step along the way. Maybe a really good match, but just part of the journey towards a bigger personal feud later in the night, or setting up the next bloodline chapter.
And that ultimately devalues the belt itself.
It can, yeah. And it supports that critique we mentioned earlier that Cody is maybe just a highly capable, very popular placeholder champion holding the belt until the company is ready for the next massive development in the Reigns and Rock narrative. And really, when you boil it all down, the core issue, the thing that seems to be plaguing Cody's reign, despite his work ethic, despite the crowd reactions, It comes down to one single, maybe fatal flaw in a lot of modern wrestling booking.
Yep.
Absolute crushing predictability.
Yeah, the sources we looked at, the analysis of his matches, they were incredibly blunt about this. Critics were saying things like there was never one single second during any of Cody's title matches where they genuinely believed he might actually lose.
And that feeling, that pervasive sense of certainty, it just makes the reign feel not just safe, which maybe isn't the worst thing, but narratively inert, lifeless.
Why is that safety so detrimental? Doesn't the audience want their hero to win?
They want the hero to win eventually, maybe, but they need to believe he could lose along the way. That safety is terrible for the viewing experience because it allows the audience to just emotionally check out.
Disengage.
Exactly. Why should you invest your hope, your energy into rooting for a challenger when, deep down, you already know how the story ends? Cody's character is booked so strongly, so protected, he comes across as almost superhuman-like, as one source put it.
Untouchable.
Yeah. And the only figures who feel even remotely threatening to him, according to this analysis, are these kind of Thanos-like figures, basically, The Rock or Roman Reigns.
And if those are the only two guys who feel like they could possibly beat him, then what does that do to everyone else? All the other potential challengers, no matter how talented, AJ Styles, Logan Paul, Kevin Owens.
It renders them weightless. That's the term used. They become completely non-viable as potential champions in the eyes of the audience because they simply haven't been built up to that same Thanos level.
And when the audience stops believing a title change is even possible,
then the championship itself starts to lose its meaning, doesn't it? The matches become exhibitions of athletic skill, which is great, but they stop being dramatic contests with real stakes.
and this predictability, it's rooted in the feuds themselves, right? Let's break down some of the specific feuds from his first reign that critics pointed to as being repetitive or just lacking that essential spark, that substance. Let's start with AJ Styles.
Okay, the AJ Styles feud. On paper, it had a fantastic hook, didn't it? And a tremendous start. You had the fake retirement angle, which got massive heat.
Brilliant angle.
Followed by that really intense, brutal I Quit match at Clash at the Castle. The match itself was cinematic, hard-hitting, great stuff. But critics immediately flagged a fundamental creative flaw. There was a profound lack of necessary personal heat between them.
What do you mean, like Cody didn't sell the hatred or Styles didn't generate enough legitimate animosity?
A bit of both, maybe, but primarily how Cody responded. The analysis was that Cody expertly brushed off all of Styles' insults and provocations. He consistently kept the tone professional, respectful, like, okay, AJ, you're angry, let's settle this in the ring like professionals.
So it never got truly personal. It stayed a sporting contest.
Exactly. It never evolved into a personal rivalry fueled by genuine rage or resentment or betrayal. It was treated purely as a contest to see who the better wrestler was, which is fine, maybe, for a mid-card feud, but it often fails to ignite a world championship program where you need higher, more personal stakes.
And this ties right back into that corporate babyface trap we talked about earlier, doesn't it? When the ultimate good guy just respectfully disagrees with the bad guy, the emotional stakes just plummets. It makes the champion seem like he's just going through the corporate motions as the company's chosen representative.
Precisely. When the face acts too professionally, too receptively, they can appear almost immune to real human conflict, which ironically makes them less relatable, less vulnerable. For that feud to really catch fire, Styles probably needed to violate something truly sacred to Cody, maybe attack a friend, bring his family into it in a real nasty way, perhaps desecrate the title belt itself, something to elicit that necessary, visceral, I need to destroy you reaction from Cody.
But instead,
Cody treated Styles more like a respected colleague having a bad day, which ensured the feud, even with the violent I Quit match, remained fundamentally safe and predictable. The audience knew Cody, the ultimate professional, was going to overcome AJ, the challenging professional. No real doubt.
okay, let's move on to the match with Logan Paul. Now, this involved one of the biggest crossover stars on the planet. Huge potential for eyeballs, for buzz. Yet this feud was described in the sources as almost non-existent and pure filler. That feels like a massive missed opportunity.
It was widely perceived as a huge letdown, narratively speaking. The entire premise felt incredibly weak for a world title program. Essentially, it was Cody Rhodes, the undisputed WWE champion, deciding he needed to teach Logan Paul a lesson about respect, about work ethic in the wrestling business.
So the title was secondary.
The undisputed title felt completely secondary to Cody delivering this kind of moral lecture to the celebrity outsider.
Okay, when the champion is using his platform, his title defense, Not really to prove he's the best, but to deliver a moral lesson to an antagonist.
Yeah.
How does that affect the championship's prestige itself?
It kind of trivializes it, doesn't it? The championship should be the ultimate prize, the thing everyone is desperately fighting for. If the champion himself treats a title defense more like a personal favor or an opportunity for mentorship or a chance to grandstand morally, it signals that the belt isn't really what matters in that moment. Maybe the champion's ego or his moral superiority is what's actually taking center stage.
Yeah, no, I see that.
The match itself, by all accounts, was apparently very good athletically. Logan Paul holds his own. But the storyline just failed to justify why the title needed to be on the line. It felt like a story they could have told without the championship involved at all, which automatically made it feel less interesting, less important than other storylines happening around the same time.
Okay, and finally, let's touch on the match with Kevin Owens. Again, a match between two guys who are incredibly popular, fantastic wrestlers. But the story leading into it felt, well, the word used was contrived.
Yeah, it really suffered from weak motivation. The title shot was basically offered to Kevin Owens as a favor, right? Because Owens had helped Cody out against the Bloodline numerous times.
Right, like a thank you gift.
Exactly. And Owens himself even initially turned it down. He cited his own poor recent win-loss record, which ironically was probably the only believable part of the whole setup because his booking had been inconsistent.
Yeah.
But then the GM, Nick Aldis, just made the match anyway. So offering the shot as a favor, having the challenger initially refuse, it just made the whole thing feel less earned, definitely less high stakes, and completely devoid of any real conflict between them.
Plus, there's the inherent difficulty of booking two pure baby faces against each other, right? Especially two guys like Owens and Rhodes who seem to genuinely respect each other. Without a strong reason for conflict, like a sudden heel turn or a deep misunderstanding, it just lacks that natural tension.
Exactly right. The audience found themselves asking two key questions. One, do I genuinely believe Kevin Owens is going to win this title, given his recent booking and the favor nature of the match? Almost certainly no. And two, even if he somehow did win, what story do we tell next? They have no animosity towards each other.
Right. Where do you go from there?
So the match is forced to rely purely on the athletic execution, the in-ring work. And, well, yeah, they delivered on that front because they're both amazing. The emotional component, the story, the why, it was just missing entirely. Critics felt it was basically a really good exhibition match that ultimately had no real consequences for the storyline, no matter who won.
Which brings us right back to the creative elephant that seems to be looming over every single one of these feuds, regardless of the opponent.
Yeah.
The inescapable, all-consuming presence of the bloodline.
Yeah. It feels like even though Cody defeated Roman Reigns, even though he supposedly finished that story, he remains, as one source put it, too entrenched with the bloodline for his own good.
Still stuck in their orbit.
Completely.
Yeah.
His subsequent feuds, like the big one against Solo Sikoa at SummerSlam, they aren't really viewed as major, credible challenges for the champion himself. They're seen more as just necessary, inevitable pieces moving around on the board in the ongoing Reigns Rock bloodline machine.
Now, Solo Sikoa, he was presented as a huge, terrifying threat after he basically took over the bloodline, appointed himself the new tribal chief. Very dominant presentation, yet the audience apparently just wasn't buying him as the guy to actually dethrone Cody. Why was there such a disconnect there?
Well, analysts looked at Solo Sikoa, despite the presentation, as more of a glorified, guaranteed win for Cody, just dressed up as a major threat. His character, while physically imposing, really hadn't been developed enough as a solo main event level threat outside of the context of bloodline interference helping Roman.
He was the heater, not the main guy yet.
Exactly. He was the enforcer. So the audience understood pretty clearly that unless Roman Reigns, or maybe even The Rock, made a dramatic, shocking appearance and interfered in that SummerSlam match, the outcome, Cody Rhodes retaining, was basically certain. The match felt designed more to further the bloodline's own internal drama and dissent, rather than to actually pose a credible threat to the championship itself.
So the overarching feeling, the consensus from the sources analyzing this, is that Cody Rhodes is currently just spinning his wheels as a side character in the bloodline story, even though he is the champion.
That sums it up perfectly. He finished his story, yes, but the long-term booking immediately plugged him right back into their story. He's now the dependable hero, holding the title, essentially waiting for the next stage of the huge saga involving Roman and The Rock to unfold.
And that's just an incredibly difficult position to sustain narratively week after week after week, especially when your hero is supposed to be this diligent, present, fighting champion we talked about.
It makes him feel like he's just holding the title hostage, doesn't it? Holding it for the next big bloodline payoff moment. And the fans, sensing that, are reacting negatively to what feels like filler content happening in between those major preordained beats.
Okay, so we've pretty thoroughly established that the core problem maybe isn't Cody himself, who seems to be performing his role as that present fighting champion really well, actually.
Right, he's doing what's asked of him, putting in the work.
But the issue is the creative infrastructure around him. The sources seem to pinpoint a glaring issue, specifically on the SmackDown brand.
Mm-hmm.
Just a fundamental lack of credible main event level heels who exist outside of the whole Bloodline saga.
Yeah, that roster asymmetry seems to be absolutely crippling the championship picture right now. Cody is, like you said before, the ideal pure white meat babyface. He's the Captain America figure for the company.
He's a villain.
Exactly. Captain America needs the Red Skull. Superman needs Lex Luthor. He needs a true antagonist, a proper villain, someone who can match him not just bell to bell in the ring, but in terms of narrative weight, in terms of stakes.
Yeah.
If you just keep having him beat guys who aren't really built up to that legitimate, could actually win the title main event level, the champion inevitably ends up looking unchallenged. And unchallenged eventually becomes boring, profoundly boring.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis weak heel roster on SmackDown, what are the immediate, maybe even drastic booking fixes being proposed to inject some legitimacy, some danger back into the title picture? The most obvious one seems to be look beyond SmackDown, cross-brand challenges.
Absolutely. That roster imbalance either needs to be corrected through trades or call-ups, or the company simply needs to leverage the fact that this is the Undisputed Championship more often. Let him defend against Raw guys.
So who are the sources identifying? Who are the high-profile challengers currently maybe tearing it up on Raw who could realistically be moved to SmackDown or just used in an interbrand title feud right now to shake things up?
Well, a few names come up repeatedly. Drew McIntyre, ironically, despite having faced Cody 3 times already in this second reign.
You think they could go back to that well again?
Maybe if the stakes were drastically different, like if it was a gimmick match with a really strong stipulation, maybe something that protects McIntyre even in a loss, or forces a different kind of match. But more excitingly, you look at someone like CM Punk.
Ooh, okay, that's a big one.
Punk is the ultimate heat magnet, isn't he? And a proven main event draw. A feud between Cody, seen by some as the ultimate corporate darling, the company guy, and Punk, the perennial anti-establishment voice of the voiceless. I mean, that story just writes itself. It guarantees high tension, high stakes, and probably killer promos.
Yeah, that feels like money waiting to be made. Who else? Anyone who brings a different kind of threat, maybe less psychological, more physical?
Definitely. We've seen names like Sheamus mentioned, a proven veteran, former world champion, brings that hard-hitting style. And then you have the pure monster-sized threats, guys like Bronson Reed, or maybe even bringing Braun Strowman back into that top mix.
Guys who Cody can't just technically out-wrestle easily.
Exactly. They provide a totally different kind of challenge, a sheer physical hurdle rather than just a psychological one. But the overall goal here is simple, regardless of who it is. The company needs to start pushing other stars on both brands, maybe, to be seen as being at par with Cody Rhodes.
How do they do that?
Give them main event booking. Give them protected finishes sometimes. Give them consistent, strong television time to build their credibility. Stop relying on just one face to carry every single major narrative thread. Because if the audience starts to believe that anyone on the roster, if built right, could realistically win that title on any given night, boom, the predictability problem vanishes instantly.
Okay, but let's talk about the alternative booking idea that seems to generate the most buzz, the one that feels the most emotionally compelling, tapping into history. It's the one many fans feel is almost necessary to truly elevate this specific reign. The inevitable Randy Orton heel turn scenario.
Ah, yes, the Orton feud. This is the kind of long-term storytelling payoff that fans genuinely crave, I think. Not just the Bloodline saga, which feels kind of separate sometimes, but stuff rooted in character history.
And the history here is deep. Legacy.
Deep history. The whole concept is rooted in Cody's past as Orton's protege, his lackey, almost, in Legacy, where Orton was this incredibly manipulative mentor figure. So the feud, the idea goes, would start innocently enough.
How so?
Maybe just as a for respect challenge, a friendly but high-stakes match between the master and the student who has now reached the top. Champion versus mentor. Great story.
But it wouldn't stay friendly for long.
Oh no. The dialogue, the interactions, the stakes, they would quickly evolve into a vicious, deeply personal heel turn from Orton.
What would be the trigger, though? How do you make that turn feel earned and psychological? Not just Orton being Orton. What's the emotional core that causes the Viper to finally strike the American Nightmare after all this time?
The thinking is that the shift needs to be fueled by Orton's own warped psychology. Randy Orton, who has always viewed himself as inherently superior, maybe he starts to perceive Cody's respect, Cody's gratitude for his past mentorship, as actually being patronizing, like it's disrespect in disguise.
Ah, like Cody, the student, is subtly implying he's now surpassed the master, and in doing so, he's devaluing Orton's entire legacy, Orton's own place in history.
Exactly. That perceived slight, even if delivered completely honestly and respectfully by Cody, could be enough to trigger Orton's deep-seated jealousy, his ego, and of course, the voices.
The voices in his head, they want the gold.
They always want the gold and they want the spotlight back. So Orton, driven by those voices, maybe he hits that signature RKO just out of absolutely nowhere on Cody after a seemingly friendly moment. Or maybe he starts running these deep psychological mind games, really messing with Cody's head, bringing up all their shared history from Legacy.
Using their built-in history becomes the emotional engine for a true grudge feud. Not like the respectful professional battles we saw with Styles or Owens. This would be personal, hateful even.
Absolutely. And that instantly solves the lack of stakes problem, doesn't it? The audience wouldn't just be watching another championship match, they'd be watching a deep betrayal unfold, a wrestling family breakdown, a violent moral conflict between a mentor consumed by bitterness and the student he once guided.
And the potential longevity there?
Phenomenal built-in longevity. Sources suggest you could easily run a compelling 4 to 6 month feud out of this. The turn could happen at a major PLE, setting up a huge heated rematch at the next big event, maybe even Hell in a Cell, given their history.
Right.
This program creates genuine intrigue, it buys the company valuable time, and it produces exactly the kind of narrative tension needed to sustain interest until the next massive chapter with Reigns or The Rock is, frankly, financially ready to launch. It's a real personal threat to Cody that crucially doesn't rely on the Bloodline faction at all. It stands on its own.
This whole conversation about needing unpredictability, about needing real threats, it kind of leads to a broader critique you hear about the modern world title scene in general, doesn't it? It's not just about Cody's reign. It's about the whole era we're in, where world title changes feel so rare and almost exclusively confined to a couple of specific big events each year.
Oh, definitely. Fans are deeply nostalgic for that feeling of unpredictability. You hear people talk all the time about the Attitude Era or even later periods where titles could actually change hands on Raw or SmackDown occasionally.
Right. It made weekly TV feel must-see.
Exactly. It kept the audience on their toes. When a title could change hands on any given Monday or Friday, it showed that the main event scene was volatile, that maybe it was more of an even playing field for the top competitors where anyone could seize the moment and win the big one. It felt like anything could happen.
But now, the assumption just feels baked into the wrestling calendar, doesn't it? The world titles basically only change hands at WrestleMania, maybe SummerSlam, occasionally the Royal Rumble if the story demands it. If a title match is happening at, say, Backlash or Clash at the Castle or even a regular PLE, the outcome feels like a foregone conclusion most of the time.
Yeah, and that predictability just kills the suspense in all those other matches. If you, as a fan, basically know the title isn't moving until the next Big Four event, or maybe even Mania, then all those mid-level PLEs, all those TV main events, they instantly become less essential viewing, don't they?
They're less important.
The argument is that having shorter, more dynamic reigns sometimes, or even trading the title back and forth sparingly between two heated rivals, is actually crucial to maintaining excitement and belief. The current, very conservative booking philosophy seems to suggest that if the challenger loses, well, they're just inferior, and if a champion wins again, well, his run continues safely. Both outcomes tend to reduce narrative tension over time.
Okay, so we have spent a lot of time detailing the creative dissatisfaction, the narrative shortcomings, the fan complaints, all the reasons why people are calling this reign stale. But now we absolutely have to pivot and confront the other side of the coin, the undeniable business reality.
Yep, here comes the reality check.
Despite every single creative critique we've discussed, despite the predictability, despite the lack of diverse challengers, Cody Rhodes is a massive runaway commercial success for WWE.
This is the absolute crux of the matter, isn't it? It's the immovable object in this whole argument. That conservative, creative approach we've been dissecting, it's probably not accidental. It's very likely a direct consequence of his incredible commercial success. Cody Rhodes is, by the numbers, the unquestioned commercial engine of the company right now.
What does the data actually show? How valuable is he compared to the rest of the roster, maybe even compared to some legends?
The data seems pretty unequivocal based on the sources. Cody Rhodes is reportedly the leading merchandise seller and overall sales driver for the entire company. Full stop.
Wow, leading everyone.
The sources indicate he's outselling every other major name currently on the roster. That includes huge stars like CM Punk, fan favorites like Jey Uso. He's reportedly outselling established legends who still move merch like Roman Reigns. And maybe most staggeringly, he's even said to be outselling historical icons like Stone Cold Steve Austin in current merchandise.
That's incredible. Stone cold levels.
That's what the reports suggest. And maybe even more importantly, from a corporate perspective, there's this number. The company's overall revenue reportedly increased by a very significant 11% in 2024, the period since he became the champion.
Okay, an 11% revenue increase happening during a time when critics are calling the creative stale. That tells you almost everything you need to know, doesn't it? It explains exactly why the company might be extremely hesitant to introduce any volatility, any risk, or fundamentally change Cody's booking philosophy. They simply cannot afford to risk messing with that financial engine.
And this leads us directly into what critics often define as the Super Cena booking trap, or maybe the Hulk Hogan model. Cody seems to be filling that exact same role that John Cena occupied for so long, or Hogan before him.
Which is what role, specifically?
The role of the consistent, reliable, merchandise-selling, infallible face of the entire company. He's the guaranteed draw for live events. He represents the moral high ground for the brand. He's the bankable hero that appeals to kids and families.
Okay, let's break down the specific hallmarks of that Super Cena or Hulk Hogan booking style. How does it apply directly to how Cody is being presented now?
Well, the first hallmark is usually incredible resilience, right? Like Cena before him, Cody is often booked to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds in his matches. He kicks out of multiple finishers from his opponents, which reinforces that superhuman, almost unbeatable aura.
The never give up factor.
Exactly. The second is maintaining that consistent moral high ground. He remains the ideal, pure, white meat babyface. He's friendly to fans, respectful to interviewers, almost always refuses to sink to the level of his heel opponents, even when provoked. This reinforces that family-friendly and therefore merchandise-friendly persona.
And the third?
The third, and arguably the most important from a business standpoint, is the commercial protection. He's protected in the booking because he needs to keep winning to maintain that top star aura, which drives ticket sales and merchandise.
So the company, looking at those merch numbers, looking at that revenue increase, sees Cody as far too valuable a financial asset to risk disrupting that whole ecosystem.
Precisely. Think about it. Turning Cody heel, even if it might be creatively stimulating for a while and solve that immediate predictability problem we talked about, it would almost certainly lead to a dramatic drop in his merchandise sales.
Right. Heel merch rarely sells as well as top babyface merch, especially kids stuff.
Historically, it's not even close, especially for a character like Cody, who is marketed heavily towards children and mainstream casual fans. Furthermore, having him lose the title frequently, or even just seem vulnerable too often, risks diminishing that Super Cena aura, that invincibility, which the company relies on to anchor the brand identity. They need him to remain the ideal, protected, conquering babyface, which is why he keeps winning, almost regardless of the immediate challenger's credibility or the repetitiveness of the feud.
So all those creative issues we discussed, the predictable matches, the lack of truly viable challengers outside of the bloodline, the sometimes bland, overly respectful feud structures, they might just be a direct, maybe even unavoidable byproduct of the commercial mandate. Keep Cody unbeatable, keep him bankable, keep him the face. Creativity has to take a backseat to consistency and revenue.
That really feels like the harsh reality of being the top champion in a massive, publicly traded global entertainment company like WWE today. And let's be honest, all of this conservative booking, this feeling of being in a holding pattern, it's ultimately serving what feels like the inescapable destiny for this title reign. Meaning, no matter who Cody defends against right now, McIntyre, maybe Orton if they did that feud, anyone else, the entire focus of the long-term booking, the big picture thinkers in the company, seems to remain laser-focused on only two names, Roman Reigns and The Rock.
those are still the endgame scenarios, the massive global marquee matchups that probably justify, in the company's eyes, this current holding pattern. Cody just needs to hold the title until they're ready for one of those blockbusters.
Absolutely. The Rock is heavily rumored, constantly speculated to return for a title match. Some sources suggest it could be as early as the Royal Rumble in 2025. That's a massive payday. And of course, the ultimate rematch, the trilogy match, Reigns versus Rhodes III, that's still arguably the biggest potential championship story left to tell. Maybe the main event for WrestleMania 41. So Cody retaining the title until one of those massive moments arrives feels like the almost guaranteed creative plan.
Which forces every other feud, every other title defense happening between now and then into the realm of feeling like, well, filler. Necessary steps, maybe, but filler nonetheless.
Yeah, he's essentially just a crucial piece, maybe the crucial piece, in the machine that's designed to keep furthering the Bloodline saga and set up those massive encounters, rather than the other way around. His reign serves that story, not the other way around right now.
So, in a weird way, Cody's almost a victim of his own incredible success. And the success of the overarching Bloodline narrative that he was instrumental in concluding temporarily. He won the title so decisively, his character is so pure, and his commercial value is just so astronomically high that the company maybe feels they just can't afford to let him be truly creatively dynamic or vulnerable in the meantime.
Yeah, the audience might be getting bored week to week, but you can bet the stockholders are probably thrilled with the results. Hashtag hat outro.
So, I guess we've reached the synthesis here, the duality of Cody Rhodes' undisputed WWE Championship reign. Or reigns, really. On one side, you have this growing perception that it's become creatively stale.
Yeah, fueled by predictable booking, by what feels like a profound lack of credible main event heels on SmackDown who aren't just extensions of the Bloodline story.
Right, and maybe fueled by this need, driven by merchandising, to keep him in this squeaky clean, almost unbeatable persona.
Yet, on the complete other side of the equation, he is undeniably commercially vital. He's driving record merchandise sales. He's apparently contributing to significant overall revenue increases for the company.
And he remains incredibly popular with the live crowds who show up every week. He's fulfilling that work ethic promise he made, being the present champion, showing up, putting in the effort. He is, in many ways, precisely the champion the company wants, and maybe commercially the champion the company needs right now. So the question really isn't whether Cody Rhodes is a good champion. I mean, his diligence, his in-ring skill, his charisma, his connection with the crowd, that's all evident. It's beloved.
Right, he's delivering on his end.
The real challenge seems to be whether the company, whether WWE, can successfully create a new generation of legitimate main event threats around its top babyface. Or is this predictable, long-term storytelling approach they favor, especially with the Bloodline, inevitably going to sacrifice that week-to-week dynamic excitement? Does it always prioritize the huge, but maybe highly predictable main event payoffs at the biggest shows over compelling weekly television?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
So we'll leave you listening with this provocative thought, something that kind of builds on everything we've analyzed today. Does being the reliable commercial face of the company, the Super Cena or Hulk Hogan figure, does it mean you must inevitably sacrifice creative dynamism for commercial reliability? Is that just the trade-off?
And tied to that, is the audience truly being fickle for complaining about this, or are they simply demanding that same high level of challenging, unpredictable, compelling, creative storytelling after the big chase is finally over and the confetti is all settled?
Yeah, if the story's finished, shouldn't the quality of the ongoing storytelling, the weekly intrigue, be paramount now?
Definitely something to chew on until the next deep dive.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time.